All right, let's get started. We've got a really interesting set of source materials here today, some white papers, guides, other documents too, all focused on a project called PinLink. And, well, how they're approaching this whole real-world asset, or RWA tokenization thing. Specifically, we're diving into how they're using it for DePIN assets, like decentralized physical infrastructure networks. Stuff needed for AI computation, like GPUs.
Right. And as we went through these sources, we kind of set ourselves a mission, didn't we? To figure out, okay, what's the actual problem PinLink is trying to fix here? How does their tokenization model really work, like step by step? Who actually benefits from this setup? And, what's different about their financial mechanics, especially this rebate model they talk about. It caught my eye.
Exactly. So think of this as us trying to get you up to speed quickly on what this project is about and maybe what it could mean down the line. Let's unpack it. Okay, so first off, the problem. The sources make it pretty clear PinLink sees a couple of big issues right now. You've got AI developers, right? And they need serious hardware GPUs, TPUs, CPUs, storage. But getting access is expensive, often really difficult.
Yeah, that's a huge bottleneck. And then on the other side, you have people who actually own these DePIN assets. Maybe they're not using them 24/7, and they're looking for, better ways to make some money from them, more flexible ways than just renting them out traditionally, perhaps.
And there's a third group mentioned too, isn't there? People who don't own the hardware.
Right. But they're interested in passive income. They want a way to sort of participate in the value this infrastructure creates without buying a $10,000 GPU themselves.
Okay, so those are the pain points. What's PinLink's answer, according to the documents?
Well, their core proposal is this unique DePIN RWA tokenization model. And they're very specific. RWA here means taking a physical thing, like that GPU, and representing it as a digital token on the blockchain.
Okay, so turning hardware into tokens. How does that actually work in practice? The sources laid out some steps.
They did. It seems to follow a pretty logical sequence. Let's walk through it. First step, asset owner, let's call her Alice again. She connects her hardware, say, her GPU, to the PinLink network.
Simple enough start. Then what?
Then step 2, the system mints a special kind of token, an RWA ERC 1155 token. This isn't just any token. It specifically represents Alice's GPU, and she gets ownership of it.
Got it. So Alice owns the token that represents her physical GPU. What's next?
Step 3 is usage. An AI developer needs compute power, sees Alice's GPU is available on the network, and rents its capacity. And crucially, the payment for this, what the sources call the service user rental fee, has to be paid in PIPN tokens, PinLink's native token.
Okay, so PIPN is used to pay for the actual service, the compute time. Where does that payment go?
Right. Step 4. The sources say those PPIN tokens, the profits from the rental, they flow into a smart contract. And this contract is directly linked to that specific RWA token representing Alice's GPU.
Ah, okay. So the money follows the token representing the asset.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which leads to step 5. Initially, because Alice owns 100% of her RWA token, she gets 100% of those rental profits funneled through the contract.
Makes sense. She owns the asset, she gets the rental income.
But then comes step 6, and this is where it opens up. Alice, once her asset is connected and maybe generating some income, she gets the option to sell fractional shares of her RWA token.
Fractional shares? Like selling off little pieces of her GPU's token?
Sort of, yeah. Selling percentages of the ownership represented by that token. She could sell, say, 30% to David and another 30% to Emily, those folks looking for passive income.
Okay, so David and Emily can buy in. How does that transaction work? That's step 7.
Yep, step 7. David and Emily pay Alice directly for their shares. This payment is called the RWA purchase fee. And the sources really stress this point. This fee has to be paid in either ETH or USDT, not PKN, and it needs to be, quote, sufficient, basically, a decent chunk of money up front.
Sufficient enough to make Alice willing to give up some future income, I guess.
Precisely. That's the incentive for her, which we can talk more about. But first, step 8 finishes the process. Once those shares are sold, the smart contract automatically handles the profit distribution. If Alice kept 40% and sold 30% each to David and Emily, any future rental income paid in PCN is split automatically. 40% to Alice's wallet, 30% to David's, 30% to Emily's.
Wow, okay. Thanks for laying that out. It's a clear flow.
Yeah.
But I want to go back to that point you touched on, step 6 and 7, the fractional ownership. Why would Alice do that? If she's getting 100% of the rental income initially, why sell off shares and get less later? You mentioned the incentive.
Exactly. The sources point directly to that RWA purchase fee. Remember, David and Emily pay her in ETH or USDT up front. So Alice gets a lump sum of potentially quite stable crypto capital now. It's instant liquidity for her, tied to her asset.
Ah, okay. So it's a trade-off. Immediate cash, paid in ETH or USDT, versus a smaller percentage of ongoing future rental income, which is paid in PIN.
That seems to be the core dynamic, yes. The sources suggest the challenge is making sure that upfront ETHUS DDT payment is attractive enough to convince owners like Alice it's a good deal.
Right, getting that balance correct.
Mm.
Okay, so let's talk about PinLink itself. How do they make money in this model? What are your fees?
Good question. The sources detail a couple of revenue streams for the protocol. First, remember that RWA purchase fee paid in ETH or USDT when Alice sells shares to David and Emily. PinLink takes a 20% commission on that transaction.
20%. Okay, that's significant. On the sale of the shares, specifically.
Yes. And in addition to that, they take a smaller 2% protocol fee. This 2% fee is applied much more broadly. It's taken from all service user rental payments, so the PIN payments from developers, and it's also taken from those ETHUS DePIN purchase fees.
Okay, so a 2% cut on basically all the money flowing for rentals and share purchases, plus a bigger 20% cut just on the ETHUS share purchases.
That's what the documents lay out.
All right, now, you mentioned something earlier that caught your eye, the rebate model. This feels like where it gets, well, really different. That 20% commission on the ETHUS DeTarwa purchase fees, the sources say it doesn't just line PinLink's pockets.
No, and this is the fascinating part. According to the material, that 20% chunk is specifically earmarked. It goes into a dedicated pot, the Service User Rebate Fund.
A rebate fund for the service users,
Yeah.
the AI developers renting the compute.
Exactly. And the sources explain how this fund is designed to work, aiming for sustainability. It's not just sitting there. The fund takes that incoming ETHUSD and invests it into what they describe as low-risk, yield-bearing assets.
Like what? Did they give examples?
They did. Things like strategies built around stablecoins earning interest. They mentioned the DAI savings rate specifically. Also, strategies involving tokenized traditional assets like U.S. treasuries they name Ondo U.S. dollar yield strategies. And they also mentioned Pendle strategies, which are a bit more DeFi native, focused on yield trading, but still generally aimed at generating returns.
Okay, so they invest the commission, but how does that become a rebate?
Here's the clever bit. It's the yield generated from those investments, the interest, the returns earned by the fund that's used to provide rebates to the service users.
Ah, so it's not the principal commission itself being paid out, but the earnings from investing that commission.
Precisely. So the AI developers renting the GPUs effectively get a discount on their PIN rental costs, funded by the yield earned on the ETHUSDD collected from fractional share sales.
That's quite a loop. So by taking a slice of the asset share sales revenue, investing it, and then using the investment income to subsidize the usage fees, they're trying to make it cheaper for developers.
Yeah, the sources claim this creates, capital efficiencies for everyone involved. The asset owner gets upfront ETHUSD. The passive income folks get a share of the PIN rentals. And the developers get their compute costs lowered thanks to the yield generated by the fund. It's presented as a way to make the whole ecosystem more sustainable and attractive.
It's definitely a different take on funding user incentives, drawing from those capital transactions, rather than just, say, protocol revenue from usage fees alone.
Interesting. Did the sources mention anything else about the PinLink ecosystem? Other parts?
They touched on a few other things briefly. Protocol-owned DePIN assets, suggesting PinLink might actually own and operate some hardware itself, not just facilitate others.
Okay, so they might be a player in the network too.
Potentially. They also mentioned something called PinAI, described as an AI-driven performance optimization component, presumably for, managing the network efficiently.
Makes sense. Anything else? Just references to a broader iFi ecosystem and an asset vetting process, which implies they're probably selective about what hardware can join the network. Quality control, maybe?
Right. And just to circle back on the token, PIN. The sources were clear. Its main use is
paying those service user rental fees. That's the primary utility highlighted developers need PN to rent compute.
And staking. Was that mentioned?
Staking was mentioned alongside the revenue model, yes, but the documents we looked at didn't really detail the mechanics or rewards beyond just stating it exists as part of the system.
Okay, got it. So boiling it all down then, PinLink's trying to connect these three groups: hardware owners, AI developers needing compute, and passive income seekers.
Yeah. Using the blockchain as the connector, they tokenize the physical hardware into these RWAs.
Allow owners to sell fractional shares for upfront ETH or USDT.
Developers rent the compute using PIN.
And then there's this unique rebate mechanism funded by the yield from investing a cut of those ETHUSDT share sales, making it cheaper for the developers.
That's a pretty good summary of the core loop described in the sources, yeah.
So recapping those key takeaways from digging into this material, there's this clear problem of accessing and monetizing AI hardware.
PinLink's answer is this blockchain-based tokenization of the physical gear. They enable fractional ownership, which could open up new passive income avenues.
And critically, they've designed this novel rebate fund using investment yields from RWA sales commissions, not just protocol fees, to lower costs for the end users, the developers, aiming for that sustainable loop.
Exactly. It's a distinct model.
Right. So thinking about this, what does it all mean for you listening? Maybe you're directly involved in AI, maybe you own some serious hardware, or maybe you're just exploring ways to engage with decentralized finance. Models like this one from PinLink, they offer a specific picture, don't they? A potential future for how physical assets and digital finance might interact more deeply.
Definitely. It brings up some interesting possibilities.
And that leads to maybe a final thought, something to chew on after listening, drawn right from exploring this material. How might these kinds of systems, ones that tokenize real-world physical infrastructure, and then layer on these quite sophisticated financial flows, like that yield-generating rebate fund, how might they fundamentally change things? Like change the actual economics of getting the compute power needed for AI, or change the very nature of how we think about investing in these decentralized networks?
It's about more than just tokens, isn't it? It's about the financial engineering built on top.
Exactly. Think about those ripple effects when you represent something truly tangible on-chain and then build these kinds of potentially self-sustaining financial incentives around it. What new possibilities and maybe challenges does that unlock?
Yeah.
Something to consider.